Good evening. Yes, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the public hearing for the town of Essex. We are going to start this evening, with the presentation of the colors and the national anthem. So if you could all please rise, and gentlemen, remove your hats.
Recording in progress.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Thank you very much to Nathan Bates for the presentation of the national anthem, and to the Scouts of Scouting America Pack and Troop 635 and Girl Scout Troop 61845. Get your cookies here tonight, ladies and gentlemen. All right, thank you, ladies. We also want to thank the Essex, this is going to drive me crazy. We'd also like to thank the Essex Middle School staff for their assistance in preparing for the meeting. Town Meeting TV, thank you very much for being here for live streaming and recording the hearing. This is a hybrid meeting with both in-person and remote participation using Zoom. So thank you, all of those of you who are Zooming in with us today and participating from home. Please make sure that if you are on Zoom and would like to speak, that you raise your hand inside the app and don't use the comment feature. We need to make sure that all of your questions and comments are on the record. Of course, if we run into technical difficulties and that becomes necessary, we will say something to that effect. I'd like to make some introductions this evening. First, the members of the Select Board. We have the Chair, Tracy Delphia, the Vice Chair, Andy Watts, the Clerk, Kendall Chamberlain, Ethan Lawrence, and the retiring Dawn Hill Fleury. We also have for town staff, Town Manager Greg Duggan, the Deputy Manager Karen Adams, the Finance Director Dan Roy, and we are joined by a number of the department heads, but they are sitting in the audience with us this evening. Also joining us, we have representing District 23, Representatives Ray Garofano and Leonora Dodge, and representing District 24, Alyssa Black. Mrs. Dawn Hill Fleury, would you be so kind as to read the invocation of civility?
an old habit. We are gathered together in civil assembly. We gather as a community in the oldest sense of the word. We gather to come together and try to make decisions about what is right, about what is wrong. Let us advocate for our positions, but not at the expense of others. Let us remember that there is an immense gap between saying, I am right, and saying, I believe I am right, and that our neighbors with whom we might disagree are good people, with hopes and dreams as true and high as ours. And let us always remember that, in the end, caring for each other in this community is far greater than any difference of opinion we might have. Thank you all for being with us this evening.
All right, and since this is a public hearing, but is just a very fancy select board meeting, I will turn this over to the chair of the select board, Tracy Delphia.
Sorry. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay. With that, I will call to order this meeting of the Town of Essex Select Board for Monday, March 3rd. Are there any additions or changes to the agenda from staff?
No.
Are there any from the board? With no changes, there's no need to approve an amended agenda, which brings us into our public hearing. I will go ahead and open the public hearing, understanding that the budget, the capital plan, and the human services funding really go hand in hand. I'd like to package those, present those all at once, and then stop, pause to have discussion, answer questions on those three before continuing with the remaining piece of the agenda. So we do have a presentation. And I did neglect to say thank you, Mr. Moderator. I will walk us through the FY26 budget. This budget goes from July 1st, 2025 through June 30, 2026. Can we dim the lights? Oh, thank you. Can everybody see okay? Is that better? Wow. You really do need to be close. So this year, the select board did make the decision not to add an arbitrary limit to limiting an increase to the budget. We really wanted to hear from department heads on what their funding needs were for the year without setting an arbitrary number. However, with that said, we did want to limit the operating budget tax increase to the minimum amount possible. Another goal we had was to meet the needs in the area of capital funding. We'll move into this a little bit more when we start to talk about the capital funding. And also we wanted to ensure the cost-effective and efficient operations of the town, specifically with repair, maintenance of fleets, so on and so forth. First and foremost, this proposed budget will keep municipal services intact for FY26. We did run into some challenges this year. First and foremost, health insurance premiums. We are also continuing to have some supply chain issues. The impact of this, an extended period of time for major equipment and vehicles to arrive after ordering. We have adjusted some of those replacements in reaction to that. And also, again, this year, police patrol officers are budgeted at 90%. To better approximate, and it's more in line with staffing due to staffing shortages. So we figured, let's not fund it at 100% and add to the budget. Let's fund this at what we've been seeing historically after the past number of years. So in this budget, there are also some cost savings and efficiencies. The City of Essex Junction continues to contribute toward our police department and assessing services. Again, assessing services are shared through the end of reappraisal, which is anticipated to be next year. Also, we decreased capital transfers from the operating budget to $216,000. This was originally anticipated to be $470,000 from FY25. $250,000 of fund balance is being used to cover capital costs this year. We will get into that a little bit more when we speak about the capital budget, but the goal here really was use one-time money to cover one-time expenses. Also, voters will be asked whether to increase the capital tax by 2 cents to ensure future funding remains intact for capital. Also, strong interest rates will allow the town to generate revenue on money that is just sitting in the bank. We're allowing it to work for us. And we've budgeted this at $350,000 for FY26. A variety of staffing changes are proposed in the budget, including the Essex Free Library is proposed to have 5 additional substitute hours per week. This equates to 1/8 of a full-time employee. There will be no impact to benefits with this move. The Community Development Administrative Assistant is proposed to become a planning technician. This is an additional 12 hours a week or 1/3 of a full-time employee. This will include benefits. The goal here is also to, with the move from Planning Commission, Zoning, Board of Adjustment into a Development Review Board, to fully staff those committees so that we have 2 full working bodies and better staff that committee. Excuse me. Within Parks and Rec, a 28-hour per week programmer is funded through the Recreational Programs Fund. This will become a 40-hour position with the addition of a 1/3 full-time employee coming from the general fund. Allocations of personnel costs between the general fund and Rec Programs Fund have been updated. Also in FY25, the Assistant Director for Parks and Rec was eliminated, and it was replaced with a Park Maintenance Superintendent. Just to better serve the community through their needs. Excuse me, just a second, I just need some water. Apologies, it's very dry in here. Where was I? Fire department budget includes additional shifts for per diem firefighters and increased pay rates for volunteer per diem firefighters. This is in an effort to better provide emergency services coverage across the board. Some more general fund highlights. Fund balance of $90,000 is anticipated to be used to offset the tax rate by paying, again, for one-time expenses. $40,000 for recreation needs assessment, $45,000 for 3 pedestrian crosswalks along Vermont Route 15, and $5,000 for Chittenden Area Transportation Management Association, or CATMA, transportation study, and this falls under economic development. As noted previously, $250,000 of fund balance will be used to offset the reduction to capital transfers. And again, the goal here is really to fund capital, to use the goal of fund balance, excuse me, is to cover one-time expenses rather than paying for ongoing expenses. If you remember some of the conversation around COVID funds, once those funds dry up, you're going to have sort of a fiscal cliff, if you think about it that way. We really want to avoid that and use one-time funds for one-time purchases. All right, so now we've talked about numbers. Let's throw these into some categories. We do have a summary of changes in operations. These are compared to FY25. So as you can see, regular personnel costs, this is including benefits, have increased $664,919. We did, again, reduce the transfer to capital projects by $254,000. This has been a safe year. We've experienced reduced insurance costs of $102,060. Sand, salt, gravel, fuel, gasoline, we anticipate a reduction of $60,000, 977, excuse me, we don't anticipate, this is from FY25, this is the comparison. For professional services, an increase of $29,979. Again, the largest increases here, the recreation needs assessment of $40,000 and the CATMA study of $5,000. Vehicle purchases increased $37,000, traffic control $21,800, And Green Mountain Transit did see an increase of $21,093. Next up, technology subscriptions and licenses. This is mostly information technology or IT, an increase of $20,213. And the net increase for all other, the net of all other increases and decreases is $45,179. So the net increase in the operating budget, again, from FY25 to FY26, $423,202. We did speak a little bit about the human services funding. It is worth noting that the figures that I just mentioned do include $163,660 of human services funding. Human services funding is 1% of the proposed operating budget. Historically, this has been included in the operating budget, but as you'll see in a moment, that is proposed to change this year. So let's talk a little bit more about the human services funding. Every year since 1987, Essex voters approved allocating 1% of its general fund operating budget to fund human services organizations within our community. This amount has previously been included in the general fund budget, so unless you're digging into the budget, you probably didn't even know it. For FY26, the 1% human services question, it will be a separate question on the ballot. This is a change being made to better adhere to case law, to be more transparent, and just be more upfront about where your tax dollars are going. All right, so we've talked about high-level numbers, but now I'd like to dive into what those numbers actually mean. For the proposed 26 budget, the total proposed budget, and as you'll see, these are broken down with human services funding and without human services funding, since that is an unknown until ballots are counted tomorrow. Total proposed budget without human services, $16,365,963. With human services, this brings the total to $16,529,623. The change from FY25, we talked about, the overall. With human services, it's $259,542. With human services funding, this is where we get the $432,202. For the percentage of the budget change, without human services, this is just a 1.61% over FY25. With the human services funding, it's 2.63%. For the tax levy change, without human services funding, 4.1%. With it, 5.54%. The grand list change, we are assuming a 0.75 or a 0.75% increase in the grand list. So what does this mean to your tax rate? Without human services funding, you'd see an increase of 3.31%. With human services funding, that number goes to 4.74%. And just a note here, the tax rate change does differ from the budget change for 3 reasons. Non-tax revenue sources have increased with the sharing of police and assessing services with the city of Essex Junction. That actually shows as revenue in the budget, and budgeting higher interest revenue, again, putting our money to work for us to increase our revenue by putting our money in higher yield accounts. Operating transfers to capital projects are being reduced, again, that $254,000 number. And an estimated increase in the grand list of 0.75% has been included, slightly higher than the 3-year average of 0.67%. So now let's dig a little bit deeper on what this means. The estimated tax impact for the town general tax without human services, we would see a 0.7295 estimated rate. This is a 3.31% change. The impact to an average residence of $280,000 would be $65.52 per year. Adding in the human services funding, that estimated rate goes to 0.7396 or a 4.74% increase. The impact to an average $280,000 home would be $93.80 per year. And you can see the assumptions. I did mention them. The average residence value, $280,000. I know I get some eyebrows at this, but that is the actual average home based on our grand list from 2007. That will change as we move forward with reappraisal. Grand list growth, again, 0.75%. The use of $90,000 from fund balance, and the tax rate above does not include the capital tax rate of 3 cents, nor the local agreement rate of, it's typically around 0.002 cents. All right, so on our theme, we're going to be diving a little bit deeper in what these actual amounts get you for services. Again, this budget does keep services intact. So where do your tax dollars go? The average Essex home, again, $280,000 from 2007. Total estimated municipal tax bill would be $2,127. Keep in mind that this is only the municipal portion of your property tax bill. This does not include the education part of your property tax bill that you receive. So, what do you get for your tax dollars? 24/7 public safety dispatch services, 24/7 fire protection, first responder services, 24/7 ambulance services, 24/7 winter plowing, stormwater services, maintenance of roads, sidewalks, bridges, buildings, vehicle replacement, Essex Free Library, senior busing, infrastructure projects, capital projects, and as you can see, there's a lot more included in there as provided by our dedicated and talented staff, many of which who are here in the audience tonight. So thank you. Moving along to the third item in this financial package is the question of human services funding. The actual question on the ballot. Shall the town of Essex vote to appropriate an amount equal to 1% of the general fund budget as passed by voters to the Essex Human Services Contributions Fund to support social services organizations, such amount being reasonably necessary and for support of programs to benefit town of Essex residents? As noted previously, question of whether appropriate human services funding will be a standalone question on the ballot. If the general fund is approved as proposed, the human services appropriation would equal $163,660. Focus areas, there are some focus areas that we do look at when vetting the applications that are received. Access to community-based resources as a support for health and behavioral health, affordable housing or housing assistance, child or family support for healthy relationships, emergency food and disaster relief, and increasing workforce development. 24 organizations received funding last year. Examples are Aunt Dot's, Voices for Inclusion in Essex and Westford, Essex CHIPS, Spectrum Youth Services, the Howard Center, Partners in Adventure, AgeWell, COTS, Steps to End Domestic Violence. And more information on this can be found at essexvt.org/human services if you'd like to learn more about those organizations. So Article 3, I apologized, I jumped ahead here. Article 2 is the human services. Article 3 is the capital tax. Article 3 does ask, shall the town of Essex increase capital reserved fund by adding 2 cents to the tax rate in addition to the 3 cents previously authorized for the purpose of financing capital projects and equipment. So the general fund budget typically includes transfer to the capital fund. Proposed transfers were reduced this year again by $254,000 compared to FY 24 and 25 levels. That funding decrease is offset in FY 26 with the use of fund balance. To make up the difference in future years, the town would need to raise the capital tax or put money back into the general fund budget. So an increase in 2 cents would raise an additional $324,840 of capital funding in FY 26 for a total of $812,100. These additional revenues would be applied to public works, fire vehicles, equipment, stormwater fund. All of these are proposed to be, well, they're expected, they're not proposed, to be in the negative by FY30 unless we do something. So this is the select board's way, the department head's way, the manager's proposal to do something to fully fund capital so that we are not in a situation where we need to borrow large amounts of money. We are self-funding our own capital. And if we do this, we raise money, as you saw with the interest revenue. If we put this money to work for us as well, it can also be a revenue generator. So I think about this as, you know, someone who owns a car. If my loan ends for my car, I'm going to keep putting that money into a savings account and keep paying myself. So then when I go to buy that car, I don't have to borrow money. I don't have to pay interest. I can actually go and pay cash for that car and not incur more of an expense when it comes time to replace that car. So a little bit more on the numbers. After reappraisal, again, expected to be completed in FY27, the 3-cent capital tax is projected to raise $895,339. Excuse me. A 5-cent capital tax is projected to raise $1.49 million. To keep up with updated replacement cycles, considering other planned capital expenditures, an adequate level of capital funding ranges between 1.5 and 1.8 million annually. So as you can see, 1.49 is on the lower end of where we should be, but staff would pursue grants and other funding sources to cover this gap to the maximum extent possible. But as you can tell by the numbers, it gets us much closer to where we should be in order to adequately fund capital. And at this point, I will turn it back over to our moderator, and we will move into the discussion portion of these 3 topics.
All right, thank you, ma'am. For this portion of the evening, if you have something that you would like to ask, please come on up. We have 2 microphones right here. We will ask you to state your name so that we can get it into the record. If you have a tricky name, maybe think about spelling it for us if you could. Folks on Zoom, once again, please raise your hand inside the app, and I'll get a little signal from our deputy manager over there, and we'll get your question to the House. All right. So are there any questions? Right now, we're only discussing the items that Tracy just reviewed. Any questions about items 4A, B, or C?
Do you need me to start again? Okay, I'll start again. My name is Martha McLaughlin, and I had a question about the human services tax. When you pay your state taxes, there's an option to donate your extra or to donate money to certain funds like the wildlife or, you know, children's education. Would there be any possibility in the future to, when you pay your town taxes, to be able to donate money to a human services fund through the town? So that way families who can't afford the extra to pay for human services because they're going to the food shelf to get their meals, they don't have to pay into that fund. But families who have the extra income can give that amount, or they can give more, and people can give based on what they have and not be mandated to give money they don't have.
Dan, do you have a?
So with the way this human services contribution fund would work, it would be a separate accounting fund. So there could be a property tax element here, which we're proposing tonight, as separate from the prior presentation of taxes. There could also be a donation element to that. So that is a feasible possibility if this article did not pass. We could establish a way for people to donate, to submit extra on top of their payment in order to help fund that human services contribution fund. That's not anything we've talked about internally, but that mechanism would be a possibility in my eyes.
And thank you for that idea.
Is there anyone else? Anybody online? No? All right. Well, then we will move to the next point. D, review and discuss Article 4. Shall the Town of Essex amend its charter to provide a clearer description of the role of town moderator?
There, that's better. I will save your ears. I will preface this by saying, as we did with the financial items, I do intend to speak to all of the charter changes in one bulk, just to avoid the time back and forth. And I will also preface this by saying that we only have so much room on the ballot. So I understand that all of the language is not on the ballot for you to see and vote for, but I would like to run through some of what this means. So for the clearer description of the town moderator, this not only combines the moderator into the organization subchapter of our charter, it adds clarity, and it also identifies what incapacity means. Essentially, anyone on the select board, the moderator, would need to attend at least 50% of the meetings in a calendar year to not meet that clause. So yeah, again, it clarifies the role of the moderator. As you may remember, we did move toward. We don't vote in this meeting anymore. We do vote through Australian ballot for all of our questions. So this was an attempt to clarify the role of the moderator, understanding that this meeting has changed. And that was Article 4. Article 5, shall the Town of Essex amend its charter to change the timing of approval of select board minutes? The current charter does state that the select board needs to approve, and I quote, at its next meeting. If there are changes to the minutes that need to be made, we will not be able to meet that criteria. So it does change the wording to as soon as reasonably possible, just to give us that leeway to make sure our minutes are correct. Article 6, shall the Town of Essex amend its charter to change appointments made by the select board and town manager? Overall, this moves the appointment of cemetery commissioners from the manager to the select board. It also removes grand juror, fire wardens, fence viewers, inspector of lumbers and shingles, and also adds in the fire chief. And it also clarifies that the town manager may appoint any officer that the select board is authorized to appoint if the select board has not filled the office, and this is the added language, within 45 days from the day the position becomes vacant, just as an added protection that we don't have long-term vacancies sitting out there. And I think I need to grow another hand so that I can shuffle all of my pages. Article 7, shall the Town of Essex amend its charter to require mailed notice to residents regarding the availability of the town auditor's report and annual report? This language does clarify that the select board shall employ a public accountant to examine financial statements of the funds of the town. The auditor's report shall be made available to the voters of the town not later than 30 days prior to the annual meeting. Previously, this was listed as 10. And then also notification of the availability of the annual auditor's report shall be distributed by mail to all Essex households at least 30 days prior to the annual meeting, and also adds language, annual town report shall be made available to the residents of the town at least 10 days prior to the annual meeting. Article 8, shall the town of Essex amend its charter to amend subchapter 10, Department of Real Estate Appraisal. Previously, this subchapter was the Department of Real Estate Appraisal. This essentially replaces real estate appraisal with assessment. Our town assessor was very involved in these changes. I think that she actually drafted this entire article. Yes, in accordance with standards for appraising established by laws of the state, so aligns it back to state law. Article 9, shall the town of Essex amend its charter to remove the description of transacting business for annual meeting that is now voted on by Australian ballot. Earlier, I mentioned with the change, there's our moderator, the change to the moderator, because we do vote on items via Australian ballot. This is largely cleanup language to remove any wording, any business not involving voting by Australian ballot. Well, we do it all by Australian ballot, so let's just clean up that language. Article 10, shall the town of Essex amend its charter for de minimis changes that include wording, formatting, and spelling. Most of these were changing statutes of the state of Vermont to Vermont statutes annotated. That was many of those changes. Yeah, and again, these are not substantive changes. These are just simple, minor wording changes. For instance, as soon as practicable after the first day of the month following. So we just took off one of those of the month because that just doesn't make sense. And that brings us to the end of the charter changes. So we will do another quick change and discuss.
All right, does anybody have a question or a comment about any of the items that Tracy just reviewed with us? Sir.
One thing that I think should be clarified on Article 7, which says, shall the town of Essex amend its charter to require mailed notice to residents regarding the availability of the town auditor's report and annual report. What that says is that we don't have to mail this to everyone. You may get a postcard instead that says that they're available and give you instructions how to get one. So that's one of the I just wanted to make sure that that was said.
Okay, we have a question from somebody on Zoom. Michelle, I don't see your full last name.
Hi, it's Michelle Goodell.
Great.
Goodell. And just a question actually about the process for this. So if these charter changes are approved, is this one of those things that goes to the state legislature to approve the amended charter, or is this something we can do internally with the town?
Hi, Michelle, it's Tracy. Yes, once should these be approved tomorrow in total, or if half of them are approved, we would then work with our Essex delegation to take these to the legislature, as our charter is actually a law. So these would need to be taken up by the legislature and voted on before they would become effective.
Thank you.
Ma'am.
Uh-oh. All right, hold on. Can you hear me?
I can't.
Okay. Margaret Smith, and I was actually on the charter committee. I was really unnerved to open the annual report and read the amendments because I didn't understand them. And, you know, having heard the explanation, they made sense, but reading it in the book, it was not clear to me when it just says, shall the town of Essex amend its charter to change from what to what? It wasn't clear in the book. It would have been really helpful to have the articles on one page and an explanation right next to it. And somebody said, well, you could look it up online, but you know how many, and it doesn't say that you can look them up online in that page. It just made it really confusing. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Yeah, and if anybody is interested in seeing these, the additions, the changes, if you go to essexvt.org, the banner right at the very top, you can click Learn More, and it'll take you to a page where it explains these. It shows the, you know, what's known as the red line, things that were removed, things that were added, things that were changed. So Margaret, good point. You know, perhaps in the future when we have charter changes, that we could put them directly in the annual report. What's that? Oh, yes, and they will be in each and every single voting booth tomorrow. So when you have your ballot, you can reference the added language, deleted language, right there as you're casting your ballot. Thank you, Andy.
Are there any other comments or questions? Nothing online. All right. My name is John Sonic, and I have a quick question. Mr. Watts, do you have an estimate for how much money it will save if we don't have to mail the annual report to everybody?
No, I don't.
All right. Thanks for that. Are there any other comments or questions? Oh, yes.
Yeah, I think Dan is looking for that number right now, as
Okay.
he usually does.
All eyes are on him.
If memory serves, I think it was around 10,000.
Oh, very good.
10,000 and change. Thank you.
Okay, very good. In addition to those, there are a number of articles for elections, election for moderator, which is a one-year term, 2 vacancies on the Selectboard, both of which are 3-year terms, and 1 for the Champlain Water District Commissioner. There is 1 vacancy for a 3-year term. Does anybody have anything they'd like to say about that? All right, well then our favorite portion of the evening now is the public to be heard. Is there anybody who would just like to get up and say something? You do have to be a registered voter in the town of Essex. So I see, yeah, I know. I like the face. Ah. Nobody online? All right, well then, Madam Chair, back to you.
Okay, our last order of business is adjournment. I do just want to say that's our proposed FY26 budget and town meeting ballot questions. We do thank you for your continued generosity and support of the town budget that allows us to maintain the high quality services that make Essex such a great community. And saying that, at this time, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Thank you. Dawn, is there a second? Thank you, Ethan. Motions to adjourn are non-debatable. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries 5-0. We are now adjourned. Thank you very much.